Hello everyone, welcome to Think Like Toppers Daily News Analysis. Myself Girish. So today is 25th of December. Let's get started. The very first news on the Hindu was the tanker with Indian crew was hit by the drone in Red Sea. So so as as we had discussed earlier in the previous video, there is a crisis going on in the Red Sea. So, from the UPSC perspective, this kind of news, rather than being a mere news, you need to just expand your thinking. That means these kind of newses are very much important through geography perspective. Why? Because this might seem to be a political news, but UPSC can ask these kind of questions based on this news through geography perspective. Like how? Like the word Red Sea. So we need to know its location. Red Sea, the location of the country Yemen and its rebellions like Houthis, and where Oman is located, and this particular juncture, that is the Strait of Bab el Mandeb, this is very important. So they can ask where this Strait of Bab el Mandeb is located, and they can ask for the match the following kind of questions. So that is where the trick of UPSC prelims lies in. Further, in Karnataka, there is once again the voice for a separate community, that is the separate religious status for the Veerashaiva Lingayats. This has been in news for a very quite a long time, and it is being resurfaced in the backdrop of the appeal for the caste census in Karnataka. So this is one of the most dominant communities alongside the Vokkaliga Gaudas. So this community has not been opposed to the caste census which is being prepared in Karnataka, but they are asking for a redo of the caste census based on the scientific lines due to the kind of flaws that particular community has flagged with regard to the present procedure which has been followed as per the Kantaraj Commission. And this Kantaraj Commission was constituted in 2015, and by this time it is already 8 years delay in publicizing the caste census report. Hence, this particular community is appealing for the new caste census. Further, so the parliament, so in the parliament, the Ministry of Education, has reported that there was nearly 150 private 140 private universities was set in India in past 5 years. So such kind of newses are very essential for writing examples in mains examples for the mains answers. So we need to note down such kind of data which is very authentic, since it is given from the side of education ministry itself. Such kind of examples has weightage in mains answer writings. So this can fetch us a few good marks when we write example based arguments in our mains exams. So when we look into the articles of the 140 private universities constituted in last 5 years, Gujarat held the top place with establishment of 28 universities within that state, and second place went to Maharashtra with 15, and Madhya Pradesh and Karnataka with 14 and 10 respectively. So how a private university is established, it is given here. It is established through an act of state legislation. That is, a state legislature has to pass a bill for constituting a private university. Upon the receipt of such act, the UGC lists under the Section 2 of the UGC Act of 1956 with recognizing such private universities. After recognition of UGC, such private universities are eligible in granting the degrees. However, such approvals for running professional and medical programs are given by respective statutory bodies, like for engineering courses, AICTE is there, that is All India Council for Technical Education, and for medical courses, the National Medical Commission, and for dental courses, the Dental Council of India. So, like that, the private universities are constituted in India. Further, three articles are very important. Sorry, not three articles, four articles are very important, which was present in 25th December's The Hindu publication. So, these articles are detailed about the criminal law bills which was passed recently in the parliament, and with regard to the job crisis and its macroeconomic reasons. Very direct question was present in mains 2023 with regard to unemployment. In mains 2023 there was a very direct and basic question with regard to unemployment, and there is an article with regard to the Colombo Security Conclave which can be surfaced in both prelims and mains. And this last article, it is very interesting, and let's come to that later. So now let's look into the criminal law bills which was passed recently in the parliament by the home minister. India's revised criminal law proposals. So this article deals with these questions. Why were the British era criminal laws in India proposed to be replaced by the revised bills, and what were the main legislative areas targeted for the change, and how does the inclusion of the UAPS definition of a terrorist act in the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita Bill 2023 differ from the previous definition that was included in the original bill. So let us look into the article, and these kind of articles needs to be read from starting to the end. Union Home Minister Amit Shah introduced three revised bills in Lok Sabha, that is the the British era criminal law bills were replaced, that is the IPC, CRPC and CPC. These were replaced. IPC was replaced by Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita Bill. The CRPC was replaced by the Bharatiya Nagarik Suraksha Sanhita Bill, and the Indian Evidence Act was replaced by Bharatiya Sakshya Bill. The CPC was not replaced. CPC remains as it is. Okay. The Parliamentary Standing Committee scrutinized all the three bills, and it led to the correction of some certain errors, and there was 50 recommendations and changes highlighted by the opposition MPs. So further, Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita Bill. Section 113 of the revised bill has modified the definition of crime of terrorism to entirely adopt the existing definition under Section 15 of the UAPA. That means the UAPA, often labeled as draconian, is defined as a terrorist act with intent to threaten or likely to threaten unity, integrity, economic security, sovereignty of India, with the intent to strike terror or likely to strike terror in the people or any section of the people of India or any foreign country. This holds the definition of what terrorism stands for. So earlier version of the bill included within the ambit of terrorist act vague acts such as intimidating the general public segment thereof disturbing public order, creating atmosphere of fear, or spreading a message of fear, destabilizing or destroying political, economic, or social structures of the country, creating a public emergency, undermining public safety. These were present. Accordingly, even non-violent speeches could be categorized as terror act under this definition. However, the new definition differs from a UAPS definition in one respect. That is, the UAPA includes production or smuggling or circulation of high quality counterfeit Indian paper currencies or coin or any other material within the ambit of terrorism. That means the counterfeit currency making was also within the ambit of terrorism under the UAPA, whereas the revised bill widens this definition to cover same activities, that is the counterfeiting currencies or coin or any other materials within that ambit of what terrorism stands for. Further, possessing the property derived from through terror act is punishable only if held knowingly. Similarly, harboring a terrorist is punishable. The offense of recruiting or training persons to engage in terror acts has been introduced, mirroring the section 18A or 18B of the UAPA. That means the radicalization of the youth. For example, many of the ISIS terror modules get busted through NIA searches. So such kind of acts also come under the ambit of terrorist act or the terrorist definition. So explanation to this section allows an officer not below the rank of superintendent of police to decide if the prosecution of terrorist act should continue under UAPA or section 113 of the bill. So let us read it once again. Notably, the explanation to this section allows an officer not below the rank of SP to decide if the prosecution of a terrorist act should continue within UAPA law or the section 113 of the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita bill. So that nodal officer, particular nodal officer not below the rank of SP will decide whether the proceedings will go under the UAPA or the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita bill section 113. So the offense is punishable by death or imprisonment for life, and those who conspire, abet, incite, or facilitate commission of a terrorist act could face imprisonment ranging from 5 years to life. So the cruelty, the word cruelty is also defined in the bill. So let us look into that. It proposes that define cruelty against women by her husband or his relatives, which is punishable with a jail term of up to and it defines cruelty with willful conduct likely to driven a woman to commit suicide or cause grievous injury, danger to the life, limb, or health. So these kind of acts come under the cruelty. The word cruelty, the definition of cruelty under the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita bill. Further, harassment of a woman to coerce her or any person related to her to meet any unlawful demand for property or valuable security. Although the offense has now been defined in a separate provision, that is section 498A of the IPC and section 84 of the original bill defined cruelty using the same terms, that is the explanation clauses. So there is no new addition in effect in the revised bills. Court proceedings. With regard to the court proceedings, the newly inserted section 73 stipulates that those who print or publish any matter concerning the court proceedings in rape or sexual assault cases without permission would be punished with a 2-year jail term. That means one cannot reveal the identity of the victim of rape or sexual assault, which attracts a jail term of up to 2 years. So, this has been made a criminal offense to protect the identity of the victim and to protect the future stigmatization of that individual. So, the explanation to this provision clarifies that the reports on High Court and Supreme Court judgments in the previous times. So, further, in an attempt to do away with the regressive terminologies, the earlier version of the bill had replaced the terms such as lunacy, mental retardation, and soundness of the mind with mental illness. However, the panel pointed out that the term mental illness is too wide in its import and could even include mood swings or voluntary intoxication. That means a mere a mere drinking habits can also come under the ambit of mental illness. That kind of vagueness was pointed out by the parliamentary panel for the term mental illness being too wide in in its ambit. As a result, the revised bill replaces the term mental illness with unsoundness of mind in a majority of the provisions. So that was one of the major corrections which has been done through the parliament report. And the term intellectual disability has been added along with unsoundness of mind in Article 367. The original bill made mob lynching and hate crimes a separate category of murder for the first time. So, mob lynching and hate crimes has been on the rise as per the NCRB report 2019 post 2015. Okay, so this kind of crimes were not defined under IPC section, and it was hardly dealt with section 153A, which dealt with promoting enmity between two groups. So this Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita bill has made mob lynching and hate crimes as a separate category of crime, which is very welcoming. So further, the offense dealt with cases where murder is committed by five or more persons acting in concert with one another on grounds of race, caste, community, sex, place of birth, language, religion, anything. However, it was criticized by the panel for prescribing a lesser minimum sentence of imprisonment of 7 years as opposed to offense of murder where the minimum sentence is life imprisonment. That means the parliamentary panel flagged an issue that mob lynching and hate crime should also be subjected to life imprisonment instead of imprisonment of minimum 7 years, just like normal murder cases, the usual or the traditional murder cases. It should be on par with that, not less than to that. That was the issue flagged by the parliamentary panel. The revised bill has now removed the minimum punishment of 7 years and now penalizes mob lynching on par with the murder. So that was one of the second major correction which has been done by the parliamentary panel. Further, we can see the ignored recommendations, those recommendations which was done by the parliamentary panel. That is, two crucial recommendations of the panel include the general neutral provision of criminalizing adultery and a clause that criminalization non-consensual sex between men, women, trans persons and acts of bestiality has been left out in the revised bill. That is, in 2018, the Supreme Court's Constitution Bench unanimously decriminalized adultery for being discriminatory and infringing upon the women's autonomy. Supreme Court flagged that the 498A section of the IPC, which dealt with adultery, had made women as a commodity of men. So it subjugated women as a subordinate to men. Hence, it decriminalized and made that adultery as a basis for divorce in such cases. So, adultery should be criminalized in general neutral manner. So, this was the intent of the parliamentary panel, but this recommendation has been rejected by the Home Ministry. So, the panel pointed out that section 377 of the IPC still be invoked when there is non consensual sex or rape of a man by another man. A woman can also initiate proceedings against her husband for unnatural sex under Section 377 of the IPC. As per Nyaya Sanhita Bill, these acts are not offences. It means that victims of sodomy, buggery will have no remedy available under it. So, if a man is raped by another man, what is his remedy? So, this has been dropped by the new Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita Bill, which leaves a void. So, this leaves men and transgender persons with no legal remedy against sexual offences. The petty organized crimes. The revised bill includes more precise definition of petty organized crimes. Whoever being a member or group of a gang either singly or jointly commits any act of theft, the snatching like chain snatching or cheating, unauthorized selling of tickets, like selling of black tickets in theaters or organizing gambling, betting, selling of public examination question papers. So, this has been said to be petty organized crimes. The explanation to these provisions stipulates that the theft would include trick theft, theft from vehicle, dwelling houses or business premises, cargo theft, pickpocketing, or theft of the ATM machines. So these kind of certain theft come under the ambit of which has been defined as theft as the petty organized crimes. Further, let us look into Bharatiya Nagarik Suraksha Sanhita Bill, that is the CRPC. The original bill introduced the concept of community service as a form of punishment for petty offences such as attempt to commit suicide, the public servants unlawfully engaged in trade, theft of property less than 5,000, public intoxication and defamation. So this punishment has now been defined under section 23 of the revised bill. So the community service is work which the court may order a convict to perform as form of punishment that benefits the community, for which he shall not be entitled to any kind of remuneration. Moreover, a magistrate of the first class or second class has been specifically empowered to impose this punishment to encourage more reparative approach to minor crimes. That means this kind of punishments has been more pragmatic rather than giving a stringent punishments to petty offenses for reformation with the intent of reformation of the accused. So, power of the police. Section 43, Clause 3 of the original bill permitted the use of handcuffs to prevent the escape of individuals accused of serious offences and ensure safety of police officers and staff during arrests. However, the panel recommended that this should be restricted to select heinous crimes like rape and murder instead of extending its uses to the persons who are accused of committing economic offences. So, in another change, the power of the police to use handcuffs has been expanded beyond the time of arrest, include the stage of production before the court as well. So, we all know that section article 21 protects us from handcuffing in the public, but this handcuffing can be used only when the accused is being trying to escape from the police, or if he is very notorious while producing to the courts. Such kind of situations do permit handcuffing powers to the police, but public handcuffing randomly is being prohibited under article 21, which affects the life and liberty of the citizens. So, conduct of the courts. The original bill permitted the conduct of means. However, certain types of proceedings mentioned in the earlier draft have been deleted. The trials before the courts of sessions trials in summary cases, plea bargainings, trials of before the high courts. Meanwhile, the provisions allowing the reading out of charge to the accused, hearing on the discharge, examination of witnesses, recording of the evidence in audiovisual means have been introduced in the revised bill, section 251, 262, 66, and 308 respectively. The police custody. The revised bill has overlooked the concerns of the panel regarding the provisions of the earlier version allowed the police custody beyond initial 15-day arrest. The section 187, clause 3 of the bill corresponds to section 167, clause 2a of the CRPC, and it does not contain any phrase otherwise than in the custody of the police. It implies the prescribed 15-day period of the police custody can now be an aggregate of the shorter periods of the custody sought over the entire period of investigation lasting 60 to 90 days. Since the people, particularly those hailing from marginalized backgrounds, may be subjected to extreme custodial violence, the panel underscored that there is a concern that this clause should be vulnerable to misuse by the authorities and does not explicitly clarify that the custody was not taken in the first 15 days either due to conduct of the accused or due to extraneous circumstances beyond control of the IOs, that is the investigation officers. The committee recommends that a suitable amendment be brought to provide greater clarity in interpretation of this clause. Under this revised bill, a detained person must now be produced before the magistrate or released in petty cases within 24 hours. So, this means the revised bill has rejected the concerns of the parliamentary panel with regard to the custodial violences, which are very common. As flagged by the NCRB report, the custodial violences are very much high in Tamil Nadu and many other states which are dominated by the tribes like Chhattisgarh, Madhya Pradesh, etc. So, usually custodial violences are very much high against the marginalized communities like the tribal communities. So, the movie Jai Bhim of the Tamil industry had projected such a kind of cases very pragmatically, and that was the really heartbreaking to know that very few of the lakhs of cases filed across the country against the custodial violences, very few face punishments at the end of the trial. So that is really concerning. Section 61 of the original bill allowed the admissibility of the electronic evidence by underscoring that an electronic record shall have same legal effect as a paper record. That means electronic record like video recording or voice recording have same legal effect as paper, which is a physical paper with a written record. Both are made on par with the legal effect. However, there was no requirement for the certificate under section 63 corresponding to the requirement of a certificate under section 65b of the Indian Evidence Act. So this provision has now been revised to state that the admissibility of an electronic record is subject to section 63. However, the existing concerns are the experts have flagged that three revised bill present a missed opportunity to rectify extensive over-criminalization or wider police powers that aggravate the state control. That means the wider, usually the IPC CRPC was brought by the British to increase the control over the citizens, that is, to constitute a police state. Experts have flagged the same concern that these new bills has been a missed opportunity to rectify this over criminalization and wider police powers which aggravates the state controls rather than rectifying these concerns to constitute a democratic power within the citizens against the state's control, or over subjugation of the citizens under the police powers. For example, if a police commits any of the mistake against the citizens, like for example misbehaving or uh, over threatening a citizen, which happened in the Hathras case, for example. In Hathras case, the police threatened the victim's family to withdraw their statements against the media. So in such a kind of situation, the victims doesn't have any provisions to seek any justice. Like for example, the police complaints committee, we the citizens, we don't have any provisions to complain against the aggravating police officers. We don't have any separate mechanisms, unlike which is present in United States, which is more democratic. Like so, the Administrative Reforms Commission also had recommended such a kind of mechanism to check the police excesses. So that has been the missed opportunity in these bills. Pointing out to the provisions of the Bharatiya Nagarik Suraksha Sanhita, which permits police custody beyond initial 15 days of arrest endanger the civil liberties. So the extension of the police custody beyond 15 days, it really endangers the civil liberties, and it also makes space for more custodial violence against the marginalized communities. The massive expansion of the possible duration of the police custody in the BNSS strikes at the very heart of the civil liberties protection. And it is also concerning that in a democratic society, such kind of extension of the police custody without any of the protection to civil liberties is really concerning. The BNSS expands the maximum limit of police custody under general criminal law from 15 days to either 60 days or 90 days, with really it's up to 3 months maximum of the nature of the offense. Under our current law, the police custody is limited to only 15 days of the arrest. Beyond that, it has to be subjected to judicial custody, where the police, the investigation police cannot access to the accused without the court's permission. But this 15 days has now been extended to 60 to 90 days. The proposed BNSS heightens the risk of exposure to police excesses, as said before. Given the widely acknowledged concerns about the safety of the arrested persons in the police custody and the heightened risk of the coerced and the fabricated evidence after prolonged detention, this provision of the BNSS is a shocking expansion of the police powers. So, these are the highlights of the concerning version of the three criminal law bills which was passed in the parliament recently by the Home Minister Amit Shah. So, however, the step for taking the reformation against the colonial era law is really a welcoming step, where it has many progressive steps like defining of the terrorism for the first time and making mob lynching as a separate crime, and the ministry has also accepted the parliamentary panel's recommendation to treat murder and mob lynching on par. So these kind of points are the advantages of the new three criminal bills. But however, on the negative side, the concerns like expansion of the police custody, no, the term of the police custody, it's really concerning, and these can be written in the disadvantages. So this gives a balanced approach, that is both the positive and the negative side of the bills, and that is what the critical analysis in the mains answer stands for. So further, let us look into the article which speaks about the job crisis which is going on and its macroeconomic reasons. So this article is very important as it had appeared in the previous mains exam, that is in 2023. So there has been many indications everywhere that India continues to be going through job crisis. The official data sources as well as on the ground of reports point to this fact. So, what are these macroeconomic reasons for the job crisis? So, we all know that with regard to unemployment, the PLFS report is the main authenticated source, and uh, the National Statistical Organization, the NSO, this publishes this PLFS report. Symptoms of low labor demand. So, at the outset, it is useful to distinguish the two types of employment that prevail in an economy such as India. First is wage employment, which is result of the labor demanded by the employers in the pursuit of their profits. Second is the self employment, where the labor supply and the labor demand are identical. That is, the worker employs herself or himself. Further, useful distinction can also be made between wage labor and jobs. The first includes all forms of labor done for an employer. That is a traditional work relation between a employer and a employee. For example, a person who is working in a corporate job, there is an employer and there is an employee relation. In the second case, that self-employment, the traditional kind of employer-employee relation is absent, where the individual employs himself. Like for example, becoming a YouTuber and earning revenue from making videos. That is self-employment. So becoming a freelancer, becoming a marketing agent. So these are kind of the self-employment kind of scenarios where the traditional employer-employee relation is absent. So, but the jobs generally refers to relatively better paid regular wages or salaried employment. In other words, all the jobs are wage labor, but all the wage labor cannot be called jobs. When we speak of a jobs problem, we are speaking of inadequate labor demand, particularly on a regular wage work. So that is what that is what the article is saying. So when we speak of jobs problem, we speak of inadequate labor demand. That is absence of adequate labor in the regular wage work. So that is what we speak when we say there is jobs problem or a jobs crisis or an unemployment. So Indian economy has historically been characterized by presence of both open unemployment, that is out of work job seekers, as well as high levels of informal employment consisting of self-employed or as a casual wage workers. So these casual wage workers, self-employed, are high levels of informal unemployment which has been seen in India. So self-employed, like for example, the most informality of Indian economy is due to agriculture. Due to agriculture, agriculture is the largest informal job which is done in India. And other informal labors are like the, for example, the migrant workers, the construction workers. These kind of employment come under the informal, where there is lack of social security, traditional social security, like the pension for example. So they lack such kind of social security. They are not registered under any kind of uh, labor authorities. So such kind of jobs are called the informal jobs. The discussed unemployment, because it is similar to open unemployment, it also indicates lack of adequate employment opportunities in the formal sector. So this lack of opportunities is reflected by more or less stagnant employment growth rate of salaried workers in the non-agriculture sector in last 4 decades. So what explains such constraints in labor demand of formal sector? The labor demand in formal non-agriculture sector is determined by two factors. That is, first, since firms in the formal sector hire workers to produce output for the profit, labor demand depends on the amount of output that firms are able to sell. Under any given level of the technology development, the labor demand in the formal sector rises when demand for output rises. Second, the labor demand depends on the state of technology that dictates the number of workers that firms need to hire to produce one unit of output. Introduction of labor saving technologies enables firms to produce same amount of output by hiring a lower number of workers. For example, there is a revolution going on in artificial intelligence. So, when artificial intelligence is further widened, this can also lead to the reduction in the number of workers required for in the firms. For example, for a company like Deloitte, the company like Deloitte, which is an auditing company, so this particular firm is auditing a or this particular firm is auditing for a company called XYZ. So if Deloitte in the future this develops its own AI tool, if it develop its own AI tool, or it goes on to acquire a AI tool, for example, that AI tool, let us call it as ABC, and this AI tool, if this AI tool is used for auditing purpose and reduces the enables in reducing the and this ABC tool enables in reducing the manpower and increasing the efficiency. Obviously this particular Deloitte company is going to lay off certain employers from its company. So that is what this explains. This second factor explains. Since economic policy is generally framed in terms of output growth, think of GDP or value added rather than level of output. Let us examine this argument in terms of growth rates. Employment growth rates is determined by relative strength of two factors, that is, the output growth rate and the labor productivity growth rate. If the labor productivity growth rate does not change, higher output growth rate increases the employment growth rate. In other words, the policies that promote higher economic growth would also achieve higher employment growth. On the other hand, if labor productivity growth rates rises, employment growth rate falls for given output rate. For example, if the labor is if the labor productivity goes high, this leads to reducing the employment opportunities, not the employment opportunity, employment growth rate. That means if there is a person named X and he can perform 10 units of output, and there is a requirement of doing 7 units of output in a company, if this particular person has the capacity to do 10 units of output of the work, then that company hires only this X person. That company doesn't go to acquire two persons like A and B who can perform 5 units of output of output units. So that is what the explanation to this particular point. So in India, the employment growth rate of the formal and non-agricultural sector remained unresponsive despite significant rise in GDP growth rates and the value added growth rate during 2000s as compared to the decades of 1980s and 1990s. Lack of responsiveness of the employment growth rate to the changes in the output growth rate reflects phenomenon of the joblessness. So this indicates a strong connection between labor productivity growth rate and output growth rate. Jobless growth with Indian characteristics. As economy grows, it is generally seen that it is also becomes more productive. The process of producing greater amount of total output, firms become capable of producing more output per worker. So this happens because of what the economists call the economies of scale. As firms produce more output, they find it easier to adopt labor saving technologies. But the extent to which the labor saving technologies are introduced depends on the bargaining power of the labor. We can make a distinction between two types of jobless growth regimes based on the tightness of the connections between output growth and labor productivity growth. In the first case, the responsiveness of the labor productivity growth rate to output growth rate is weak. The possibility of jobless growth in the case emerges exclusively on amount of automation and introduction of labor saving technology as given in the example of the AI. If AI, like as explained in Deloitte case, if AI tools can do the auditing of thousands of papers in just few minutes, so this reduces the requirement of the manual labor, right? So those are called the labor saving technologies. But the employment growth rate in such regimes would necessarily increase if output growth rate happens to increase. Under weak responsiveness of labor productivity, the positive effect of GDP growth rate on employment would dominate over the adverse effect of labor saving technologies. Here, solution to the job crisis is just more rapid economic growth. In the second case, which happens to be the Indian case, the responsiveness of the labor productivity growth to output growth rate is high. The positive effect of output growth rate on employment fails to counteract the adverse effect of labor saving technologies. Employment growth rate in such regimes cannot be increased simply by increasing the GDP growth. The extent to which the labor productivity growth rate responds to output growth rate is reflected by what is termed as the Calder-Verdon coefficient. In the recent working paper, we show that India's non-agriculture sector characterized by higher than the average, the Calder-Verdon coefficient as compared to other developing countries. It is this distinct form of jobless growth regime in India that makes India's macroeconomic policy challenge qualitatively different from other countries. The macroeconomic policy framework. The central contribution of the Keynesian revolution in macroeconomics was highlight the role of aggregate demand as binding constraint on the employment. The fiscal policy was perceived to increase the labor demand by stimulating the output. The developing countries that inherited a dual economic structure during their independence confronted additional constraints. The Mahalanobis strategy identified the availability of capital goods as binding constraint on output and employment, putting forward the policy of heavy industrialization. The structuralist theory, based on the experiences of developing countries, highlighted the possibility of agrarian constraints and balance of payment constraints. Both these constraints led to key policy debates in India, particularly in the decades of 1970 and early 90s. Nonetheless, what remained common to all these different frameworks was the presumption that increasing the output growth rate in non-agriculture sector would be sufficient condition for increasing the employment growth rate in formal sector. But the evidence suggests that employment challenge can no longer be met only through the rapid GDP growth. Rather, a separate policy focus needed on employment in addition to focus on GDP growth. Such employment policies will need both demand side and supply side components. For example, the extent firms in India find it easier to automate due to lack of adequate skilled labor, increasing quality of workforce through better public provisioning of education and healthcare, as well as bridging the skill gap are important. On the demand side, the direct public job creation will be increased. Financing such expenditure while maintaining a debt stability requires reorienting the current macroeconomic framework in significant way, including increasing the direct tax to GDP by reducing exemptions and improving compliance, and a more imaginative use of macroeconomic policy to pursue a constructive employment agenda. So the article revolves around that the need for both demand side and supply side integration in the employment policy rather than focusing only on the supply side. To kickstart economy as a cycle, we need both demand side and the supply side. So the buyers and the suppliers both needs to be integrated into the employment policies rather than looking at them in a exclusive manner. So the evolving role of Colombo Security Conclave. The next article deals with the Colombo Security Conclave, which is of both important to prelims and mains. From the prelims point of view, we need to know what, and from mains perspective, we need to analyze why there is a need for a mechanism like Colombo Security Conclave. So recently, India's National Security Advisor Ajit Doval took part in the 6th NSA meeting of the Colombo Security Conclave. So agreed upon the roadmap for year 2024 to promote safe, secure and stable Indian Ocean. So the conclave was held. The meeting also included the member states, that is Mauritius and Sri Lanka, the observer states Bangladesh, Seychelles. Maldives was a member state but it was absent recently. So it is imperative for India to continue pushing for a proactive CSE to address the challenge in Indian Ocean. So India has been a proactive player of safe Indo-Pacific policy, that is peaceful Indo-Pacific policy with maritime security and free trade movements or free navigation can be said. So the changing dynamics in the Indian Ocean, the CSC underscores the evolving dynamics of the Indian Ocean, with Sri Lanka joining India and Maldives in the trilateral maritime security grouping, but came to a standstill after 2014 due to rising tension between India and the Maldives. Maldives is the archipelago nation of the Indian Ocean, which is a crucial player in maintaining stability in Indian Ocean. So in 2020, India not only pushed for revival of and institutionalization of the Colombo Security Conclave, and it also expressed interest in expanding this CSC mechanism with inclusion of Mauritius, Seychelles and Bangladesh. The CSC demonstrates India's evolving strategic vision for Indian Ocean, and the Indian Ocean is the heart of an evolving multipolar world today, with extra-regional powers like China competing to make inroads in the region. For India, a traditional power in the region, the CSC offers an opportunity to strengthen its leadership and security architecture. Since its independence, India has played an increasing role in promoting security in the Indian Ocean. The lack of capacity of island nations to secure the seas and counter transnational threats has continued to motivate India to assist them in defense and security related capacity building. The infrastructure development and economic provision, the India has also played a vital role as a first responder to avert coups and to offer humanitarian assistance and economic assistance during COVID 19, and CSE offers India an opportunity for institutionalize its role, shape the regional security architecture, and better address the existing and emerging threats in Indian Ocean. The revival that is linked to the China factor which is playing in the anomalies of the CSE are like China has invested more in BRI projects to make its presence in Indian Ocean in a substantial manner, and it has owned a naval base in Djibouti, and it has taken the lease of Hambantota port of Sri Lanka for 99 years, and China has been very quick to send many researcher vessels to Indian Ocean just to spy on India's missile programs uh, or to figure out the Indian Ocean bed and its prospects for its future explorations of the rare metals and minerals. And China has been very proactive in making changes to Indian Ocean region forum. So India realizes that many regional countries do not necessarily consider China as a threat. Yes, this is for sure. For example, For example, Sri Lanka and Maldives do not view China as a threat. They view China as a partners for the future, for their infrastructure needs, for the debt recoverment. But the China's policy, the debt trap policy of China, like for giving huge huge credits on unviable unviable infrastructure to the debt-ridden countries like Sri Lanka and Maldives has made them in the center of the debt trap. So this has made further vulnerabilities in these countries to have a overt anti-China policies. CSE has focused mainly on five pillars, that is the maritime security and safety, countering terrorism and radicalization, trafficking and transnational crime, cyber security and protecting critical infrastructure, and humanitarian assistance and disaster relief. Further, the strategy of accommodation and flexibility is in fact contributing to the security of the Indian Ocean. The CSC has investigated terrorism and terror financing, narcotics trafficking, cybercrime and security, marine pollution, maritime law, and coastal security. The next iteration of these conferences are scheduled for 2024. The joint working groups have already been established or are being finalized on terrorism, the cyber security, humanitarian aid and disaster relief, trafficking and transnational and organized crimes. Apart from regular NSA and Deputy NSA meetings, the countries are collaborating on capacity building in sectors like counterterrorism, police, law enforcement, intelligence exchange, cyber security, etc. So, for example, to say with regard to intelligence exchange, India and Sri Lanka. India had shared its intel with regard to Easter bombings in Sri Lanka. So this can be one of the finest examples with regard to intelligence sharing mechanism between these littoral countries of the Indian Ocean. So influence of politics upon the Colombo Security Conclave is, as a young institution, CSE itself, it remains vulnerable to domestic politics. For example, the Maldives has absence in the recent conclave. So Maldives a new elected president came upon a nationalistic campaign, that is India Out campaign. Though these countries are democratic, they are subject to domestic political dynamics as well. So these have the repercussions on the stability of the CSEs. For New Delhi, the whose ambitions and responsibilities and threats have increased significantly in the last decade, CSE will remain an important instrument to help it consolidate the regional leadership. So from this particular article, we can take really 5 to 6 points 5 to 6 points with regard to the question, the need for CSE and its importance for India. The importance of CSE for India, that is the Colombo Security Conclave kind of mechanisms, and its importance to India, and the remaining challenges. So this can make a very good answer for 10 marker question. So the last article deals with the recently held COP28 of UNEP with regard to climate change. In UAE. So one of the finest step forward which happened in COP28 was it linked the climate change with public health. That means nearly 140 plus countries recognize that there is a direct threat to the public health security in the backdrop of changing climate. So that has been a very significant step that has happened in COP28. So let us read the article. So 28 UN Climate Change Conference COP28, which was hosted by UAE, which was held in this year when the planet is facing the unprecedented challenges, from being the hottest year on record to wildfires that have devoured the communities and floods that have wiped away cities, and evidence of current crisis is crystal clear. So in such a critical year, COP28 was held with a new hope, and it has achieved a new milestone by linking climate change with the public health. How the climate change is related with public health, that we'll be seeing in this article in detail. That is, the climate change is a public health crisis. Why? Severe temperatures, heat stresses, excessive rainfall, floods, an increase in water and the vector-borne diseases, and frequent extreme weather events are all evidence in the existential threat to our health security. We all know that in various reports, that is the temperature rise or the air pollutions. These are all linked to many of the NCDs like cardiovascular diseases, the stress, anxiety, and many lung related diseases. So these are the direct threat to the public health in the rising pollutions due to use of fossil fuels. Hence, WHO declared climate change as the greatest threat to global health in the 21st century. Marginalized communities are on the front lines of the worst impacts of the climate change, and this could drag more than 100 million people back to extreme poverty by 2030. So the negative impacts on the health are highlighted due to the climate change. The climate risk index shows that 8 out of 10 countries most impacted by extreme weather are low to middle income countries, and one of the countries are India. India stands at 7th place as the most affected country due to climate change, and this was reported by Climate Risks Index. A good global response. On December 3, the Health Day of COP28 highlighted the vital links between climate and health, underscoring that the combating climate change is integral to advancing climate health. Urgency to address the root cause of the climate crisis, fossil fuel use, was set in early November with health leaders representing more than 46 million health professionals globally issuing an open letter to COP28 presidency and the world governments. So, to commit to an accelerated, just and equitable phase out of fossil fuels as the decisive path to health for all, nearly 1,900 health professionals at this year's COP propelled the momentum to prioritize the human health and well being in climate decisions taking center stage. Events and activities elevated a focus on people's health for the first time at a COP like never before. COP28 UAE Declaration on Climate Health that signifies global commitment to address the climate related health impacts emphasizes the imperative for the governments to fortify healthcare systems. This was nearly supported by 143 countries. The COP28 presidency, WHO and UAE Health Ministry and prevention of a group of champion countries also hosted first ever climate health ministerial, and which brought together nearly 50 health ministers across the countries and 110 high level health ministerial staffs. So, this has been set as the roadmap and opportunities for the action to address the rapidly growing burden of the climate change on healthcare systems, and which has a huge socio-economic benefits and better health in the future. So, with regard to India, how India has been facing the public health issues with regard to climate change. So, is India immune to these two challenges? Definitely not. So, let us see how. India was not represented at the historic Health Day of COP28. However, India has witnessed a significant rise in extreme temperatures, heat stress events, cyclones, floods, and droughts. In 2019, it ranked the seventh globally severely impacted country for climate change as per the Global Risks Index. India in 2023, an assessment of extreme weather events brought out by Down to Earth magazine and Center for Science and Environment, said that India has seen a disaster nearly every day in the first 9 months of this year. From heat to cold waves, cyclones, lightning and heavy rains, floods and landslides, all kind of anomalies have been seen by India in first 9 months. So this has claimed nearly 2,923 human lives, and it has affected 1.84 million hectares of the cropland, and it has destroyed nearly 80,000 houses. The RBI has recently reported that nearly 4.5% of its GDP can be jeopardized by 2030 due to the impact of extreme heat, humidity on labor hours, emphasizing the economic risks associated with health heat related challenges alone. With rising air pollution, India has faced nearly 1.6 million premature deaths in 2019. So, the public challenges like malaria, malnutrition, and diarrhea, India being most vulnerable to malnutrition as per the Global Hunger Index, it has been subject to various aggravations due to the increasing climate change events like floods. So these kind of climate change events further aggravates the access to food, which further increases malnutrition. And this projected increase in these incidents aligned with the weather related disasters and their health ramifications poses a significant threat to already strained public health infrastructure. The COVID 19 pandemic exposed the vulnerabilities of India's public health infrastructure. That's why the PM Ayushman Bharat was put in place to increase the insurance cover for the betterment of the health infrastructure has been made under this scheme. So, need for plans. Placing health at the forefront of climate planning in India will have a long term benefit in the coming years. Over 700 million individuals in India, representing a significant portion of the population, are residing in rural areas. They rely directly on climate sensitive sectors like agriculture, fisheries, forests, and natural resources such as water, biodiversity, mangroves, coastal zones, grasslands for their livelihoods. Hence, the public health needs to be integrated with the climate change policies. Prioritizing health in climate planning safeguards both immediate and long term well being in the face of climate change impacts. So, this focuses enhances the community resilience and disease mitigation and ensuring populations better coping up capabilities with the changes, and this contributes to sustainable development. The integrating health into climate planning is not only economically prudent, and it also reduces healthcare costs and increases productivity, but also strategically crucial for overall effectiveness and increasing sustainability of climate actions in India. So this finishes our 25th December daily current affair analysis of the Hindu. So if you need any of the improvements from my side, please do let me know in the comment sections, because I am just a beginner to teach all these stuffs since I was just preparing for my UPSC exams all these years and gave my prelims in 2023, gave my mains in 2023. So just let me know with regard to any of the improvements needed. Let us learn together. Let us build a community of well informed citizens together in this platform of Think Like Toppers YouTube channel. So, if you like this video, just like, share, comment, and subscribe to this channel. Thank you.